Reality Bytes.
Welcome to Reality Bytes Radio on the 23rd of January 2015. It's 4 o'clock in the afternoon in Florida here. It's 9 p.m. in the UK and an hour or further on Central Europe. And we have Aaron Franz on Pacific time at 1 p.m. your time.
That's right.
Welcome back, Aaron. And I finished your book pretty rapidly, I have to say, and I've gone over a little bit more of it the last few days just to see what kind of aspects of it I wanted to talk about. And I picked out Eugenics, the post-genderism debate, and the whole religious side to this, which is fundamental to it, I suppose, as is the eugenics and all that kind of thing. But just coincidentally, lost my train of thought there. I picked up the Telegraph from Australia. I think that's the wrong one. The Telegraph today has an article by the Archbishop of Canterbury suggesting that the elites would use transhumanist robotics and artificial intelligence to take more advantage of the poor. Now, of course, that's all part of the agenda, of course, to ensure that the masses, if you like, are kept in their place. And it's interesting that he's coming out and saying that because I don't know what he actually knows about the subject, but he seems to be just going along with the whole agenda. As is the Pope, of course, who's talking about climate change and we should all just have less babies and all the rest of it. So, what would you say to that, firstly, Anne?
Yeah. So it's the Archbishop, right? It's a religious figure here.
Yeah, he's the head of the Church of England after the Queen, basically. He's the second highest.
Goodness, yeah. So you have a high-ranking religious authority giving you a elitist view when it comes to converging technologies. So Yeah, it's definitely an opinion that should be listened to. And he's not the first one to talk like that these sorts of technologies, converging technologies, which are artificial intelligence, nanotech, life extension, all those sorts of dramatic transhuman technologies, that they will create greater disparity in the gap between the rich and the poor. And that's like a recurring theme when people talk about these things, especially not so much people just pushing the idea of transhumanism, but real authorities tend to talk this way because, well, they're the ones that ought to know, I suppose. You've got the Strat Trends report from 2006 and all that, and they've been revised it since then, of course, but they said that the whole world would be made up of a tiny rich elite, with most of the world just being slum and subsistence dwellers, and you had lots of big names writing books that say the same thing too. So whenever it's a big shot, they tend to say like, the world is going to be increasingly divided. And a lot of times they speak geopolitically too, in that there will be rich countries, and there will be incredibly poor countries, and the rich countries will be a small minority too. So that on sort of the global level, in terms of countries, get the same sort of idea going. I've seen it written quite a bit that, well, the way it's described is interesting because it makes me think of the situation now where we have, in America certainly, and in Western countries, we have the population who has a lot of fun toys and gadgets like cellular phones, iPhones, and things like this. And these are the sorts of technologies that Jacques Attali and all these other folks write about. And we're living large, and the poor countries across the world know of our situation here and envy it. And at the same time, there's really nothing they can do about it because they're living in absolute poverty. However, the desire to acquire those same little toys and gadgets in countries across the world is there, especially with the proliferation of media being global now. So everybody wants these things. And in a way, that sort of desire for greater, for more technological toys and just living a good life, as it's perceived, the good American life, or just the good life of not being in absolute poverty, but beyond that, having fun things too. That will be an incentive for people to shift, like population shifts, people moving all over the place. So, there's going to be a lot of nomadic people going from country to country in search of these things, in search of a better life. With there should be no. It's completely understandable. You've got a horrible situation across the world. People want to better that, but we're coming up on a time where there's going to be a lot of moving around because of that, actually.
Yeah, the Scots and the Irish were kind of forerunners of that as well. So, we're all over the world because we had to leave our native countries to find work, basically. And the same thing can apply to immigrants all over the world. And I think was it Jacques Attali that said that the next boat people would be Americans? I think. He
had a lot to write about how America was going to lose out to Japan, and he saw Japan rising up and taking over the global leader status and all that. So that's what he wrote about in that book, Millennium. That was a big theme in the book. So were transhuman technologies.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. This article in the Telegraph, it's actually filed under the section for religion. Just because he said it, but obviously it's more to do with science and economics. It's got nothing. It's not anything to do with religion, apart from this guy being the second most senior person in the Church of England. But he actually said this in a speech to Wall Street. I don't know what he's doing at Wall Street. What business do they have there? Maybe he's looking to invest some of the money that the Church of England has got, or something, I don't know. But he actually said artificial intelligence and gene therapy could hand super rich ever more power. The Archbishop of Canterbury's dystopian vision of a robot future and amid Wall Street address condemning growing gap between the rich and the poor. And then he went on to say that the rise of robots and gene therapy could allow a tiny, ultra-rich elite to amass even more power, while almost everyone else grows poorer. So, I mean, he's got the agenda down to a T, isn't he? And I suppose he's at Wall Street telling them, well done.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. Well,
But,
that definitely shows you the global aspect of it too. That he's there in the States giving the speech. So there's that aspect of it.
Yeah, and then I just did a quick search on the back of that article, and there was an article written in May 2014 by Zoltan Istvan. I'm sure you've heard him. He calls himself a visionary and the founder of the Transhumanist Party. So I take it they've got a political party now, have they? And author of the best-selling novel The Transhumanist Wager. And his title of this article is The Biggest Worry About Transhumanism. And his only worry is that he's not going to be a part of it. But his whole article is just a promotion piece for it.
Yeah.
He's basically saying that the rich 1% will use all this stuff and nobody else will get it. And that's his biggest worry. But I get, portraying the fact that it's definitely a good thing. We all should have it. We should all be changing our body parts to suit somebody else's idea of what makes us better.
Yeah, there's a lot of dynamics going on with this conversation because you've got people coming out clearly promoting transhumanist agenda. It's an agenda that comes along with public relations and all, certainly. And like you're right about that Zoltan Istvan story is a PR piece, and it's plugging not only transhumanism but him and his transhumanist party or wherever else he's working on. So I think we need to be shrewd in understanding that as a reality of just media in general. So that's a good thing to be aware of. But it's funny because these guys will say that these technologies kind of just built into them by their nature is this disparity between rich and poor, and the social equality is going to split even further from what it is now. It's ridiculous, the gap between the rich and the poor now. And we hear stories about that all the time, so we're constantly reminded, so people are aware of that. And that's an issue. So it's funny. They bring out these transhumanist technologies. They promote them, say we need them. We got the social inequality problem. However, at the same time, the transhumanists are making sure, put your worries to rest, that all these technologies are going to be distributed to the poor, and they're going to be equitably distributed. That's the term they like to use. So that's a good thing. So that's actually one of the problems to take care of. Make sure that everybody gets these things, so that we're all equal, right? So there's a whole nother little trick for you too, in that they're trying to convince you that everybody needs these things in order to keep up, in order to just live in this brave new world we're creating. And that kind of just bypasses the whole debate of, well, are these things any good to begin with, and what's the nefarious side of these? Oh, no, we don't have time to worry about that. We just need to take them on, otherwise we're going to get left behind. So that's a tricky little move they do too.
Yeah, he actually admits here. He says the leading transhumanist science and technology is likely to come from large companies and elite universities, many of which are mostly controlled and administered by the uber rich. So there's admission right away. That, your university education isn't worth the paper it's written on, because it's somebody else's opinion of what you should be learning. Then he goes on to say, it's therefore natural to ask, will the uber rich, the wealthiest 1% of the people on the planet, freely share with the rest of the world the transhumanist technology they develop? Well, possibly if they shared their wealth with the rest of the planet, we wouldn't be talking about this. There's a simple solution. We wouldn't, it doesn't ask that question. Yeah. But or will they take it for their own and attempt to create an Aldous Huxley Brave New World scenario where they become the bona fide rulers? That's implying that they've got a right to rule, of course, through radical technological advancements that others can't access. Well, I can't see these guys chopping their legs off and giving themselves artificial limbs, really. Yeah. I mean, if any of these transhumanists want to try it first, I'll gladly take a look and make up my own mind whether it's a good thing or not.
Yeah. You know what's disturbing me here the most, possibly, about this story here, Neil, is that it's echoing the exact things that I was just saying previously, and before this, I hadn't read this story. I didn't know about it. You're just reading it to me for the first time, but it even mentions Brave New World. I said that. So I've got the talking points for these ridiculous articles, which are just repeated ad nauseum. They're burnt into my memory at this point. So yeah, that's a troubling thing in its own, but it also is a testament to that, yeah, these articles are spewed out and copied over and over again. And once you know what they say once, they say it again.
Yeah, well, he goes on again to admit something, which of course is totally, I would say, tongue-in-cheek, because he must know the truth of it. Mostly gone are the days of brazen monopolistic tycoons such as John D. Rockefeller, J.P. Morgan, or Andrew Carnegie, as if their offspring aren't carrying on the business, who often operated on a survival of the fittest business model. Well, they operate on a survival of the fittest human model as well. It's not just business, and that brings us on to the eugenical aspect of transhumanism, which of course it is. And when they're talking about the 1%, if it's going to be that much, it could be as much as 0.5% of the global money men or whoever they are controlling the rest of us. They are operating on a eugenics model because they're going to let the poor starve to death, basically, in much of the developing world, and the rest of us are going to be left in abject poverty to survive as best we can, and it will be survival of the fittest. You know, and that's in the physical and mental sense. You know, it's nothing to do with genes. It's just who can eat the most, who can get the most to eat, I guess. Yeah.
Well, the Rockefellers, Carnegies, and company, they started out with their monopolistic capitalism to gain their fortunes, but then they moved into the foundation building business then later, and then so they expanded their empire, and the understanding of those families and how they continued, as you said, they continued on the business. Yes, they continued the business, and they expanded it into the non-profit, non-governmental organization sector. And the projects that those sorts of groups do are just there's so many, and they go covertly too. Of course, this is well known among, I'm sure, most of your listeners here, so I don't have to go into great detail about that. But yeah, these are the same families too that are famous for, or not as famous as they had ought to be, but they are the eugenicists. You put a lot of money towards that too, and so that was also a large project. And they can, marry their businesses together. What one business does that is supposedly separate. So you got the big oil companies, and then you've got the non-profit, non-governmental organizations of every which sort, and medical and all the rest. They're all owned by a handful of people. So the agendas of all these groups just go fit right together, and that should be glaringly obvious, and shouldn't be a surprise that the whole eugenics agenda is wrapped up into so many areas and done in such a way as to make us think that it's not even an issue these days anymore too, that it just died out years ago, nothing to worry about. We've moved forward. There's none of that left in the world.
Yeah, they're trying to actually equate this the disparity between who's going to get the technology and not to vaccines. And we've saved so many people by giving them the measles vaccine, etc., etc. They don't actually mention that people in the third world just need a good, 3 meals a day and some clean water, and they'd probably be okay. But again, we've got Rockefeller mentioned here, and of course he's famous for funding Margaret Sanger and Bill Gates' his father, and ultimately Bill Gates himself. So we know the agenda when these guys are talking about survival of the fittest, and it isn't a business model. It's definitely a eugenics model, and they couldn't give a damn for anybody else. And I would suggest the only reason they want this technology is it's not to transform themselves; it's to ensure that none of us are able to fight back, basically.
Yeah. Well, it could be used for different purposes. It could be used to enhance intelligence, okay, but could also be used to control intelligence. And, that just goes, that's the gut reaction to these things, is if I put a chip in my brain, I'm going to be able to be remotely controlled. Yes, that's obvious. That's quite obviously true. And the trick is to use public relations to hammer out that survival instinct in people and get them to work through the problem, go, oh, okay, I know that could happen, but it's not going to happen because these things are good and everything's all right. And the vaccine thing you mentioned, too, deserves a little note as well, because that's something I've noticed pop up in transhumanist conversation all the time, and in these news articles that are repeated over and over again. They oftentimes refer to vaccines as an improvement or an enhancement in the same sense that a brain chip or nanotech that would somehow be biological, transhuman upgrades, they call them. They're the same thing as a vaccine. The vaccine is like the old version of transhumanizing yourself and improving yourself because now your body's resistant to diseases. Well, it used to be vaccines. Now you inject nanobots in your bloodstream and do the same thing. So they're always equating that. And in so doing, they're putting vaccines up on this great pedestal like they're a wonderful thing, but they're also doing the same thing to these converging technologies that haven't really hit the scene as of yet. So it's again, so many little tricks that they throw out time and time again, and it's worthwhile to know that these news stories are just repeated over. It's the same story over and over again. So that's something for people to look for.
Yeah, and of course, vaccines are looked on as a preventative measure. And again, you could look on brain chips as preventing you from developing. I mean, something that can enhance can obviously do the opposite. Yeah. Uh-huh. So again, there's an aspect of control, and as you mentioned, who's controlling the chip? You know, who's got the scanner, and all that kind of stuff. But again, the only thing I've ever seen any of these transhumanist people do is supposedly put a chip in their hand and have a scanner read it. That's all I've seen them do. I think there was one guy who put a chip in his brain. I can't remember.
If he did, I missed that one.
Maybe it's somebody they used for a medical thing or something, and said it had made him talk or whatever. But I do remember seeing something like that. But again, they don't go to the ultimate end, which they claim is possible and which they claim would do us all a lot of good. You know, they don't say, look, I've got a chip in my brain. Look what I can do. I can beat this computer at chess or whatever. Well, there's no examples of it. There's no proven examples that it works.
You know what's interesting to think about here, Neil, is that we are going to be given such examples in the future at some point. And I'd like to speculate on these kind of things. I like to throw out a prediction that will likely end up being wrong, but one that I think something along these lines is going to happen. I've read reports that certain implantable microchips were effective in controlling Parkinson's disease. And that made me think of Michael J. Fox because he's like the public face of that disease. And so if they wanted to pull a PR stunt for implantable chips, they could get Michael J. Fox on TV after he had a chip implanted in his head, which legitimately did somehow improve his health, get rid of the symptoms of Parkinson's, and perhaps even cure it. I don't know how good these things are. But, he could go through with that, be on TV, be on Oprah, and be like, hey, look, I'm cured. This is wonderful. Just imagine the possibilities of these sorts of technologies and how much more they can do. I don't know if Michael J. Fox himself is going to do that, but we're going to see that style of media coverage coming in, I'm sure, the very near future.
Yeah, well, now, of course, it might backfire in just as dramatic fashion as Oscar Pistorius, who was pushed out there as this superb transhumanist athlete, and only to find out he was on all kinds of antidepressants and stuff and shooting his girlfriend. Mm-hmm. So there's a negative aspect. And he was the first poster boy, really, of that kind of thing with the blades. Yeah.
Well, they got to be careful who they pick for those roles, I suppose. And maybe they will be more so from here on out. Who knows?
Yeah. But even that, we're told that these things would just be like normal legs and feet and everything, but his certainly weren't. I mean, he couldn't walk down the street with them on. You know, it makes me wonder why they put that out, why they didn't, why it had to be somebody who could run a bit faster, as if we all want to do that,
Yeah, well, better, faster, stronger, right? $6 million man. So yeah, it makes you think of that instantly.
Yeah, well, he looked a bit human, didn't he? But you couldn't possibly look human with them on. In terms of the eugenics side of it, obviously they say it's going to enhance your brain. You'll be able to be a lot smarter. But I mean, how far does that necessarily take you? I mean, if everybody's a lot smarter, what does that really move us on from where we are now? I mean, there's no. It seems like we're jumping ahead. We're not working things out properly in a kind of chronological fashion to come up with the best ideas or the best technology. It's just this giant leap forward, as it were, to who knows what. I mean, are these kind of semi-robotic humans going to be inventing more technology, or are they going to be trying to make human people more human? I mean, if it's artificial intelligence, it's going to look after itself first, isn't it?
Yeah, well, that's a symptom of our current paradigm, I think, is that we believe that if we were able to do things quicker, or if we were just more intelligent, if we were able to memorize more things, if we were able to cram more raw data into our heads, that would instantly make us smarter. That's sort of the generic equation, I think, that people have in their minds, that more is better. More intelligence will create a better situation. And it's not that simple, but we like to simplify things in our day, so that's the way people are looking at things. And I don't believe that's the way forward. As you're saying, like, we have a lot to deal with before we kind of get to that point. I don't think we're mature enough, for one thing, to start developing these sorts of dramatic technologies. We've got a lot of issues to work out before we go there, to say the least.
Yeah, well, we're told our politicians are the brightest and the best, and that's why we have to pay them so much, so they don't go off to the private sector. And look at the mess they've made, and they're supposed to be intelligent. I mean, if that's what intelligence brings you, well, we're better off without it, I would suggest.
Well, the funny thing is that politicians just bounce back and forth from private to public anyway, so that's what happens.
Yeah, of course. It's okay, moving on. We'll go on to the post-genderism. Because again, it's the androgynous human, if you like, but they're not going to be quite human. They're going to be androgynous and transhumans as well. Mm-hmm. So we're going to see kind of androgynous robots. So there'll be no reproduction there, will there? And again, that's eugenics.
Yeah. The whole. This is where things take a real weird turn, and people are like, no, wait a minute, what is going on here? So to preface this whole post-genderism idea, I'll just say that it is popular within transhumanism, and you can see that all over the place when it comes to folks who are talking about transhumanism and promoting the idea. They're definitely into the concept of post-genderism. And what is that? It's the idea of either going beyond the dual human gender of male and female. You take the male and female and you say, well, they're separate. Yeah, that's not good enough. Either you create new human beings that are androgynous, both male and female, or you just create some sort of new creature that's beyond gender altogether. It doesn't need gender, because if you're producing humans on an assembly line or some sort of genetic experiment or whatever the case may be, you don't need sex at all anymore. You don't need the separate genders. You don't need any gender. You just have your assembly line, and that does the trick. So it's a very bizarre subject, however, one that's near and dear to the transhumanist heart, and they do write papers about it. James Hughes, the former president of the World Transhumanist Association, and his colleague George Dvorsky wrote a paper called Post-Genderism Beyond the Gender Binary, which goes into great detail about all this, and it gets really weird really quick. They cite radical feminists and other similar people as kind of paving the way to this. And they actually mention, strangely enough, they mention how different forms of pornography and things like that, and weird sorts of fantastical fiction and stuff is paving the way for this too in popular culture, and they mention that in the paper. So yeah, it's a bizarre subject. It's one that's very real and part of the transhuman agenda, I would argue. And so that's I don't know.
Yeah, I saw. Yeah, I read an article on there a few weeks ago, and it was at some exhibition, and they'd made a robot, a woman, and sliced it in half from head to toe, kind of thing, and put it out in this kind of provocative pose. It was obviously naked, and the subject of the article was could people ever have sex with robots?
Mm-hmm.
And you know, it's just anybody that I'll say this. Yeah, for sure. Anybody that wants to have sex with a robot is mentally ill.
Yeah,
they're mentally ill, and anybody who suggests it, if they suggested this 50 years ago, they'd have been locked up.
Yeah, it's crazy. That is a running theme you'll see all the time, and the sexualization of machines. You see it everywhere. Where you gave the perfect example there: half female body, half machine body. And it's either like some sort of poster where, it mimics advertising. The female is in some sort of alluring pose, obviously, that goes without saying. Or maybe it's a TV or a movie program, and, that's the woman's the object of the male sexual desire in that, and she's part machine or whatever. It happens all the time. It happens so much that one has to wonder whether it's, again, part of an agenda. Like, well, why do I see this repeating theme all the time? What is this sexual machine I've been seeing over and over and over again throughout all media? What is that about? I would argue there is an agenda there.
Well, they mixed this out. I've just dragged it up. I think it's the same one. They mix it in, actually. The headline is, would you have sex with a robot? And then it goes on to say, prostitutes, police and cleaners revealed to be just some of the jobs that droids could take over by 2025. So they just throw in the sex with a robot. Oh, by the way, the police are going to be robots as well.
Mm-hmm. And the police will apparently not bust you for being with a robot prostitute because it'll be legal by that point.
Well, they'll probably say that the robot's not suffered any harm because it doesn't have any human feelings, and yet they want to tell us that robots are going to be more human.
Well, so very clean too. Very clean, no STDs or anything like that. Yeah, it's the way to go.
You might have to carry a can of WD-40. That's not a pleasant thought, but anyway.
KY40.
Yeah. I'm glad you said that. Okay, this isn't actually the article that shows you the actual robot, but it's there, and that was quite a recent one as well. That was May last year. So I mean, it's not the only article out there, as you say. It's been touted everywhere. And the first time I saw something like this, I just thought Stepford Wives. When was that made? Back in the 70s?
Yeah, I've never seen that one actually. Oh.
You need to download that one. The Stepford Wives, starring, I think it was Yul Brynner that was in it.
I've never seen it. I really haven't.
Yeah, well, it's basically the men kind of got together in this kind of, I don't know if it was a gated community or a small town, I can't remember, and basically they got fed up with their nagging wives, and while they were young enough and good looking enough, they just killed them off and swapped them for a robotic one that looked exactly the same and did everything they were told.
Interesting. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, again, that was back in the 70s, I think. That was made. So I mean, this whole idea that people want this androgynous world is something else that's promoted heavily, and yet, I can't imagine anybody in their right mind thinking, oh yeah, androgyny would be a fantastic thing. Why would it be? It's just not natural. And again, you've got to be somewhat screwed up to think it is, because it's just not a normal human trait. But then, of course, these transhumanists don't want normal human traits.
Well, you know what's interesting, Neil, is that the way they lead the conversation when it comes to this is that there is such a thing as intersex human beings. It does happen. It does occur naturally. However, it's in a very tiny percentage of the population, like 1%, I think, or I don't know what the percentages are, but it's a very small amount. So they take that tiny minority and then they try to play the touchy-feely, we love everybody card. We're progressive, and therefore we're trying to stand up for other people's rights, the rights of this tiny minority of people that are misunderstood, and somebody's got to stand up for them. And, you know, while they're doing that, meanwhile, they're trying to really appeal to the majority is what they're doing. They don't care about that little minority. It's about what they want to do to the majority, and that they want to turn the majority into androgynous creatures or whatever, or at least get them thinking that, you know, that's a good idea. You know, oh yeah, I can see why that's a good idea. Get them, the majority of people, thinking along those lines at the very least. And this sort of trick, again, I'm talking about so many tricks today, but that's another one, is that you exploit a tiny minority of people in order to push some kind of agenda in the name of tolerance and love and things like that. Very sneaky.
Yeah, well, just, I mean, by coincidence, I'm looking at immigration forms for myself, and there's special sections for transgender people, same-sex marriage, and they've all got more rights than I've got. They get special treatment, you know, and it was all supposed to be about equality, and now your ordinary Joe Soap has got less rights than anybody. You've got to be, although, you know, I could argue that there's only 5 million Scots left in the world, and I'm an ethnic minority at this stage, but I could try that card. I don't think that'll work. Okay, we'll move on to the religious aspect of this, because you spent quite a bit of time on this near the end of the book, and it's very interesting that you mentioned green quite a lot, the green man and all the rest of it. And of course, the whole agenda is the green agenda, and we're all supposed to go green. So again, that puts another context to the word. I mean, the word green is just associated with growing your own kind of vegetables and not driving a car, you know. But I mean, this takes it a whole lot further.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the color green has loads of esoteric significance to it. One being the green man, being the god Osiris, also Dionysus, Bacchus, those characters. And it ties into the green man that you'll see on the sides of buildings like churches and other important, you see outside government buildings, downtown perhaps, you know, in a courtyard or something. It'll be the guy's face, a man's face, and a lot of times it'll be a water fountain, so they're spitting out water. Has esoteric significance too, but the face has leaves built into it. So that's the ubiquitous green man that we know so much. It has a lot, when you're talking about the occult meaning there, it has a bit to do with the plant body of man. So there's the mineral, plant, and animal kingdoms, all of which are believed to be a part of the human constitution. And it actually fits into this esoteric story of evolution in the esoteric religious sense, not the purely scientific sense that we know from Darwin and things like this. There is an esoteric idea of evolution, that there is a plant body in humanity, and that's very interesting too. Like the idea of a plant and sort of the reproductive qualities of plants and how they differ from humans, and if we could sort of regain some of the abilities that even plants have in that regard, and reproduction and regeneration and things like that, then that would fit into the transhuman agenda too. So it's taking these ancient esoteric concepts from the mystery tradition, using them within the modern transhumanist sense, and also throwing in occult ideas all over the place when you're promoting transhumanism, and it's flying over the heads of nearly everybody who's watching the show, as it were, watching it up on stage, because the stage is the altar to Dionysus too, the Green Man.
Yeah, well, it's funny, when I lived in Ireland, I had a small cafe there, and a friend of mine used to make these kind of things, these sculptures of the Green Man and stuff, and I used to sell them in my cafe, hang them on the walls and stuff. And it's, like you said, it's an ancient religious kind of belief, and Ireland, Scotland in particular, and those kind of cultures are very heavily into that. And it's interesting that they've used an ancient culture and attached it onto this supposed futuristic culture, and tried to gel the two together. And we see the likes of what's his name, the guy that's run off to China. I can't remember. He wrote the Earth Charter with Maurice Strong. Sorry, Maurice Strong. Yeah, sorry, Maurice.
Yeah, it is Maurice Strong. Yeah, because he's
and Gorbachev. Yeah, this is their whole thing. They talk about this kind of this green man kind of concept as well. And of course, Josh, I was going to say Josh Soros, but I suppose him as well. Maurice Strong are all into this Gaia worship, and they've actually set up some kind of church over in China, I believe, and they get all their rich friends round to dance around campfires in the nude or something. But again, it's an ancient pagan culture, and which they're trying to attach to this shiny chrome kind of future world. It shows you how far back their belief system goes, and they'll do anything to try and bring it about. It doesn't matter how bizarre.
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting to see, as you're saying, the paganism definitely is brought out by guys like Gorbachev and Maurice Strong. Absolutely. I mean, that's the idea they're pushing, along with their low carbon footprint, sustainable development, that whole project that they are intimately involved in, the whole Club of Rome, first global revolution idea. That's their revolutionary concept, is to get this, get a new world system that operates with sustainability and sustainability in mind, sustainable development in mind, but beyond that, to create a religion that substantiates this new system, because that's what religion does. It substantiates the actual economic, social system that exists at any given time. You need the religion to give God's good blessing to that system, is what the purpose of big religion has always been. And so, yeah, they're hearkening back to pagan times, pagan religions, things like this. It's very...
Of course, pagan religions resorted to human sacrifice to feed the gods. So, I mean, are we going to see that? Are we going to see, I don't know, robot executioners? I mean, if I think it was the Club of Rome said that humanity was the enemy. So are we just going to replace humanity with robots? That's the solution, is it? And as you say, like the police, these Robocop type things. It's almost like we're almost at Terminator stage, if that's the case, because somebody else is controlling these robots, and possibly other robots who get enough artificial intelligence to decide they don't like humans at all, and just decide to wipe them all out.
Yeah. Well, it's the most disturbing of the advocates for the whole sustainable development, we love the earth crowd. The most disturbing characters in that go as far as to say that, humans are the problem. We kill off most of them, and this has become a pretty well-known fact, and it gives away. It's good in that these people say this, because it gives them away, and you can see what their psyche is like and what their motivations are like. They've never for the vast majority of people, and they're just an object to be fit into this new system that is going to take care of the earth, and the new humans are going to be the stewards of the earth and all this. But who cares if that's a good thing, and that's what we should shoot for. And there's so many quotes to this extent that it's pretty easy to make the point that is the case.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know who's going to make all these robots for these robot armies and robot police, and what kind of resources are going to need to make them. Somebody's going to have to mine all the metal and all the rest of it. So it's kind of like, it's a catch-22, but it's ridiculous. It's like the electric car. You pull into the gas stations in the UK, and they've got these electric charging points. I've never seen a car parked at one yet, and nobody questions where the electricity comes from. You know,
Yeah,
but we're all supposed to have electric cars, but not ask a question. Well, who's supplying the electricity?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
It's the same thing with this. Who's going to supply the robots?
Mm-hmm.
Is it just going to be other robots?
Yeah, there's so many questions to answer, and going back to like the beginning of the conversation that we were having, where it comes down to trust on the public's point for the public. That's what they need to give over to make this whole technological future realities. The big thing is the public's trust. Do they trust that these technologies will be safe, that they will be promise the things that they promise, they will actually make those promises and keep them? Or is this going to be a good thing? So the real battleground is the human mind. So the trick is to get the public to just trust that everything is going to be okay, and to bow down to authority and have this sort of love of authority and just complete blind trust and faith really in authority. That's what's being engendered so that this whole thing can go forward. And that's not at all a good thing. It never is.
I can imagine a scenario in this so-called world full of terrorists where there's a live television feed of some robot SWAT team taking out the most wanted terrorists in the world or something, and everybody will go, "That's fantastic! That's fantastic! We need more of that." And that's it. Or some drug dealers or some major drug cartel will be busted by the use of technology and robots, and nobody will be hurt except a few bits of machinery which we can repair. No human lives were lost except that of the bad guys, and it'll be pushed that way.
Or like the bomb robots now. They send the bomb robot in for whenever there's a suspicious package out. In fact, this happened just a week or two ago here it was in Los Angeles. It was on the news, I saw it, that there was a suspicious package on Hollywood Boulevard. I was like, oh, this is going to be humorous.
Was it wearing sunglasses and a long trench coat?
I'm trying to remember what it ended up being. It was like, I think it was a box full of clothes or blankets or something. But, they sent the robot in there. And, it's a good thing we have that robot because it keeps all the human law enforcement personnel safe, after all.
Safe from a box of clothes.
yeah, exactly.
They must be tough guys. They must be tough guys. I mean, I tell you, 50 years ago, a police officer would have gone up and kicked it, just to see what it was. But now they have to send a robot in case it's a bomb. It's just crazy. But I mean, again, the public will swallow it. And I mean, this article that was in the Daily Mail back in May about would you have sex with a robot? They actually put "you" in capital letters as if they're asking you personally. And it says, it's obviously a propaganda piece. It says 45% believe that countries will have robot armies in the next 10 years, and almost a fifth said they'd have sex with a robot. Well, there's a fifth of the people out there are strangely mentally ill in some fashion, if that's true. Well, 29% admitted they had no problem with others having android sex. Well, they've got problems as well. And 1 in 10 questioned in the survey wanted a robot child. Why would you want a robot child? For what purpose?
I could see how they sell that again, is that fertility rates are dropping, right? And couples are legitimately having a harder time having natural children. That is a real thing that's happening. And so different alternatives arising are going to be sought for. People will take whatever they're given in that regard, because people do want children. And if robot adoption pops up as a possibility here, then I have no doubt that people would do that. And that's just like that AI movie by Steven Spielberg or whatever. That was the main theme in that, if I remember.
Yeah, absolutely. And he turned out to be a nasty little bugger, didn't he? The, I mean, this like 1 in 10. I don't believe that for a minute. But as you say, people will be sold on this, and I don't know what girls' toys and stuff are like nowadays. But I'm sure the dolls that they get nowadays are getting more and more human, and that's the way to do it as well. If the child has been brought up on a robot child, then it'll think it's normal.
Yes.
And then they've got robots doing the the household duties and everything else, and so everything can be a robot then.
Yeah,
Why
definitely.
not?
Yeah. The realism is getting more and more impressive, and back to the sexualization of machines, that's certainly the case. The sex dolls are getting more and more real, and those are becoming more and more. The mainstream has more and more knowledge of these things, that there are single men that believe they have relationships with sex dolls and things like this, and so they spend thousands and thousands of dollars on the most realistic one. And what started as horrific documentaries portraying this phenomenon has, over time, our senses have been dulled to it. At first it was horrific. After that it was a bit funny. People laughed at it. It's humorous to laugh at. And then after that it's just, the senses are numb. It's like, oh yeah, those guys having sex with dolls. Yeah, we know them. It just becomes this little subculture. Like, it's like they're the new, it's like a group of bikers. Like, that's a little subculture. Bikers are subcultures, and men with sex dolls are now a little subculture. Like, oh yeah, those guys, we know them, and it's like cute, but it's odd. It becomes just a normal part of life at that point. It's interesting to see the progression of those sorts of things.
Yeah, as I say, I mean, if you can get a hold of the Stepford Wives, it's well worth a watch. And but it's this basically these men married to slaves. And they've married this robot slave, and she's the most pleasant. She's really nice and always dressed nice and always has her hair done, and it's a perfect woman. Does all the baking of cakes and all that kind of stuff, and nice little flowery frocks. But yeah, I mean, these guys at the top, the Rockefellers, they hate women. I mean, that's they've done so much harm to women that they can't possibly like them. I mean, they've done a lot of harm to men as well, but I think particularly to women in terms of pushing the whole abortion thing, the vanity, all this kind of stuff. They pushed at women to make them feel they're not good enough in many ways, and then they pushed the whole feminism thing to make them think they're a lot better than they were. But all that happened was the price houses doubled, and they had to go out to work to pay for it, just like the men did, and pay their taxes. It done them no good whatsoever. And yet,
no, go ahead, Neil.
Well, I mean, women now are complaining that they can't get pregnant at 45 because they put their career first. So maybe they'll have a robot child because that's the only option. And they won't have to worry. They won't have to worry about the child being 18 and then being 65 because they won't really have to look after it. It'll look after itself.
I think you hit the nail on the head, and that's another real-world example of how transhumanism can offer an answer to the strange sort of society we've come to live in. Like, there's so many problems that come along, and women they've certainly done a number on. The media has, and it's a real shame to see what they do just in the daily television. All the stories are thrown out there for women to consume, and they do, and it works, and it's sad that women are given this belief that they have to be able to do everything, balance the career of the family, to stay in, to exercise 5 hours a day somehow, throw that on top of everything, be perfectly healthy. And they just give them all these idealistic situations that they're given to believe that they can do all at one time, where you can't do that many things at one time. You can't physically do it. However, females seem, and this is my opinion, they seem prone to they get really upset that they can't be perfect, and they really want to be, and they strive to fulfill all these goals that are thrown at them. The beauty thing, the losing the weight, the career. They want to have all that, and when they don't, they really get really sad about it. And that's, I don't know. It's just unfortunate to see that and see that it works. And yeah, just a really sad situation.
Yeah, well, of course, they're pushing all that stuff on men now as well. I mean, if you go into the pharmacy or the supermarket or whatever, there's just a bigger shelf for men's cosmetics now as there are for women's in some cases. And if they've had those kind of supermarket shelves when I was a lad, and I'd even picked something off of them, my mates would have kicked me about the street, I think. But that's another thing. In terms of this robot child, I mean, apart from it not being a normal relationship, I mean, you're not going to have a robot baby and then it suddenly grows into this child. It's going to have to be replaced as it grows up for you to have any kind of semblance of this being your child, because it can't stay a child forever. It has to develop into a teenager and a young adult, and maybe they'll pitch it that way. You get an upgrade every birthday or something, and eventually you'll have this child that will look after you in your old age, and the state won't have to.
There's this bizarre phrase that I've seen used. I forget who I read that was saying this, but they used this phrase, the bribe of the motor car. And what that means is that in technologically advanced, civilizationally advanced, supposedly, civilizations of wealth and whatnot, that people seek careers and seek wealth, and they do get quite a bit of wealth, but the price is that they don't have time to just have a personal family life anymore. And so birth rates decline in these societies. In the Western world, as we know it, is the big example of this, is that when incomes increase, when the middle class and affluency just among the regular population, what's believed to be affluency, when that rises, so too does the size of the family decrease. So that's just a phenomenon that does always occur, and that's something that people who are on the geopolitical level and thinking about like long-term strategies and the big shots, big players in this, they know about that. And they refer to that, and sometimes they'll use little phrases like the bribe of the motor car to describe that.
Yeah, I mean, I can't remember who made that analogy with the car either. It was one of the big players anyway in one of the books. But yeah, I mean, the job's been done on women for sure, and men have been kind of but well, again, getting back to the media, men are portrayed as being dumb. And every kind of so-called sitcom, the men are stupid and the women are all kind of powerful. And we've also seen that in the case of female politicians. They're portrayed as ultra smart. And I suppose if you look at Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama, I mean, Barack Obama is, I would suggest, is seen as just a guy on a puppet string, and he's just reading off a teleprompter, and then they compare him to Hillary Clinton. She can talk the talk and walk the walk kind of thing. She's a big, powerful woman kind of pulling his strings. And the same in Germany. You got Angela Merkel, the all-powerful leader of Germany, and we had Margaret Thatcher, I suppose, was the first one. And men portrayed as buffoons, basically. Margaret Thatcher's husband was a drunk, and he was portrayed as a buffoon. The same with, Hillary's husband in many cases. Yeah, and Angela Merkel, I don't know if she's married or not, but I certainly wouldn't climb over anybody in bed to get to her, that's for sure. Anyway, I wonder where they're going with that. If they want to steer society in a more matriarchal model, or if it's just something that they're using at the moment, I can't tell in that regard. No, me neither. We've only got a minute to go, so final word to you on this? Just quick generalization or conclusion?
I would repeat what we were talking about earlier, in that when you read these stories promoting transhumanism, they're basically just copy-pasted. And that's an earmark of public relations firms and how they operate. So just keep that in mind when you see one of these stories. Look for the exact same story somewhere else. I'm sure you'll see about 20 of the same one.
Yep, I agree with you. Okay, Anne, thanks very much, and possibly next month we'll have you on again, talking about something completely different maybe.